your fear of the unknown and leave the planet you call home. Leave all the thoughts you think you know. It's time to let them go. Let it go. Extend your hands towards the stars and dip your toes in the valley of Mars. Celestial storm in my backyard and the universe explodes. Let's see how fast our hearts can go. 'Cause you and I could be that comet in the sky. If we hold our breath, take a leap and close our eyes, we could fly. I believe if we try, we could fly. Like the heroes in the sky, we could fly.
Hi, everybody. This is Richard Sachs. I'm your host on Lost Arts Radio. Most of you know that. Welcome to new listeners. This is our show for Sunday, the 17th day of September. I'm really glad to have you with us. This is a treat for me because we have one of our good friends, a guest who's returning, Dr. Gabriel Cousens, that was on a long series that I recommend that everybody listen to in the archives if you haven't already. That was on all aspects of healing and nutrition and lifestyle and things like that. A lot of valuable information there. But Dr. Cousens has been going through a transition to another level of things, I think. At least that's my impression, observing from the outside. And I just want to hear everything that he's doing and thinking about and planning and what is important to him now, because as long as we talk about things that are relevant to all of us in the world, then it's perfect. So welcome, Dr. Cousens, and thank you for coming back. I'm glad to hear you again.
Well, I'm happy to be here. I think you're doing great work, so I'm always happy to support that thing.
I think our motives are the same and really simple. We just want everybody to be okay, and as long as the global rulers are attempting to create hell on earth and do some unfriendly things here, I figure we've got some time. Why don't we just do the opposite and make it as good as we can? So I want to hear what's happening with you, and if I'm correct about some kind of a transition going on, and what's going on and what's important in your experience right now.
Well, my work is expanding to reach a much greater public and really focus on my humanitarian programs. Right now I have 17 programs in 11 countries around the world, and I couldn't do it all. So what I'm doing is stopping my public programs, which reach a few hundred people a year. It's sizable.
That's at the Tree of Life in Patagonia is what you're talking about, right? For people that don't know.
Yes. Right. And expanding it much more to reach, hundreds of thousands of people with the media type things like Facebook and so forth. So it's much more information, but information is really the wrong word. Inspiration, spiritual insight, spiritual understanding, as well as scientific understandings as it's merited, such as what we're talking about today, which I'm looking at as a scientific basis, about the global warming, global cooling discussion. And I will continue to see private clients. I'm not taking new ones. I just really could only be in so many places at once, and I made a decision that if I'm going to expand the teaching effect with Facebook and YouTube and expand my humanitarian programs, I had to end the public programs. I will be doing, and we have funding as much as you can have anything in this world, in the monetary world, to do 400 diabetics to really demonstrate at the journal level of this approach to healing diabetes naturally with a moderately low carbohydrate, vegan live food approach. So those are kind of my immediate plans for the next 2 years.
So that's a big project for the 400 people, that the subjects that you're working with. Is that kind of an extension of that video that you did, 30 Days Raw, something like that?
Yeah, it's a gigantic extension.
Right. Okay. On a big scale.
Right. And so once that's completed, then I've completed that part, and now it's how do we bring and expand and elevate awareness, physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual awareness, because I'm speaking on all those levels, out to a much greater public.
So you're going to be traveling a lot or using more electronic media?
Well, it's an interesting question, because I'm not used to having free time. It's been a long time.
I know, it might be pretty
traveling.
Strange.
I will be mostly using the media. I like being in one place. I like Patagonia, Arizona. I like the tree. It's definitely an energetic spot. I had one person just yesterday from Vancouver. She says, I don't know what it is. Well, as soon as I come here, I start feeling good. And we're a power spot energetically, and we're a vortex. Sedona's vortex. So this is one very big where we are. Very big.
But I've been at the one where you are, and I would definitely agree. It has a great energy to it.
So that's really where I'm looking at. I am also looking, and that's part of our discussion today, that it's quite possible that, according to the cycles of warming and cooling that we have out there, that really that we could be entering into a more immediate global cooling in 2019.
Let's do kind of a segue and say what brought your attention onto that subject from the usual live food discussions.
Well, we do a lot of farming, or let's say advanced gardening.
Mm-hmm.
We provide food for maybe 90 people on a regular basis. And we do effective microorganisms, which is a way of activating the soil. It's veganic farming, so we don't require manure because we're able to activate the soil and add the protein content of the soil equal to any manure, like rabbit manure. It's more concentrated, high NPK. So I'm looking at the question, how to proceed. So if there's global warming, you're going to do different kinds of intensive gardening or farming, small farming, than if there's global cooling. Global cooling is
okay. Well, right. Yeah, you want to adapt to whatever the climate's going to be, I'm sure.
Right. So I began to study the question. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
And that's really what we're talking about. And as I began to study the question, I got answers that didn't go along with, the idea that global warming is a one-time thing based on human activity, and it's a linear line increasing into the 2100. It just isn't supported by at least the last 120,000 years of weather on the planet. 120,000 years.
And you were looking into this. You were looking into it to see, what do I have to do with my gardening to adapt to whatever it's going to do, right?
That's exactly the point. It's like, okay, let's see what the story is. And generally speaking, as most of the listeners know, you can't really trust the public media in any way to get any kind of serious actions.
I don't know. I'm pretty shocked to hear you say that, but okay.
You're joking, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So basically, I just began to do research with my scientific background. I published papers in biochemistry and biophysics 50 years ago when I was in college. So I have a scientific background of how to look at things. And that's the key, is I'm looking at it as a scientist. Let's read the information. What I learned at Amherst College, where I went to school, we learned this most with history. There's a difference between primary sources and commentary sources.
Right.
The newspaper,
big difference, yeah.
It was the commentary. And so I said, let's go to the primary sources.
So that's again, I assume everybody knows what we're talking about, but in this case, primary source means that somebody's actually doing the experiments and reporting what they themselves are doing, right?
That's right.
Instead of somebody just reading
research.
Yeah, okay.
Instead of reading somebody's interpretation.
Okay, got it. That makes sense.
And so I said, okay, let's go to primary sources like you do when you study history. So when you're studying history, you read what the newspapers at that time wrote, not what the historians who read the newspapers gave you their interpretation.
Or some guy that just came back from a battle, you see what he wrote about what he did, or something like that, right?
Right. So that's the key, I think, in understanding it. So I do what I've been trained to do. I know in college they don't train you to do too much anymore, but in my day, back in the 60s, we were absolutely trained that to go with primary sources.
Mm-hmm. Right. Okay.
And actually draw our own direct conclusion from the actual primary information. So I just took that research approach and applied it to looking at the climate change.
Yeah. Now your comment about that not being done so much anymore is completely true. I mean, my experience in crazy person going back into the university environment now, they tell you, don't worry too much about primary sources, trust the government agencies.
They actually tell you that?
They say if you want to quote somebody like CDC, that's an unquestionable source.
Interesting. Okay, so it's a different world because that is, of course, a very inaccurate way to go about getting your information, period. You know, based on real research, both historical as well as straight science. You really have to go with the primary sources. And that's what I did. I studied a lot of the primary sources to get an overview of what's going on. Okay? And I'm coming out with a paper, hopefully I'm going to finish it in a day or two, which I call Cycles of Global Cooling and Warming, What to Do. And it raises the question, what's going on? And how do we look at what's going on? And then how do we proceed? I'm taking it from I take it from a few points. I'm a large organic gardener focused on sustainability. I'm a scientific researcher. I'm a holistic physician. And I'm also a spiritual teacher. All these things are converging in getting some clarity here.
Okay, good.
I don't accept because I feel it's true, which is the way we're looking at things today, is if I feel it, that makes it true. This isn't the way it works in science. Strong emotive feeling doesn't make things less or more true. In fact, my high school physics teacher, who I love, Mr. Einbecker, said it really easy. The heat of an argument is directly related to the lack of knowledge of the people arguing. The more anger, the more heat, the less knowledge. So I learned that in high school.
Yeah, you can see it.
That's how I look at it. It's like I don't care how strongly I feel about it. What's the research say? So that's my approach of how I looked at it, or how I am looking at it. And it's a longer discussion. I've looked at the graphs. This is what we're doing today. And I've looked at this. I've looked at that. I looked at the history. The Earth's been around for a while, and I'm going to limit it to the last 120,000 years. Okay. Within the 120,000 years cycles, because we only can go back so far with some accuracy, then we have 2,000 to 10,000 year cycles. and within that we have 2,200 to 2,400 year cycles, and there's a microcycle, 206 years, which they call the centennial cycle. And I have looked at the data from the centennial cycle point of view of how to look at the weather. And you heard the word cycle. So the first question we have, I mean, we have computer models. You can, whatever you put in, you're going to get a certain answer, okay? And we have historical models, meaning what happened 120,000 years ago, what happened 10,000 years ago, what happened in the last 206 years. And what we clearly see is it's not linear. So
well, you've also got a difference in type of sources, too, because in the last 206 years, people were writing things down. But they didn't write them down so much, well, the people that we know about 120,000 years ago. So they're going off geological records, and they're going from geological and interpreting, right, at that point.
Yeah, well, which you can do.
Okay.
They can go back and look at the geography and kind of see what's going on. So those are, a really important kind of way of trying to understand it. So the first word is, if you look at the global warming thesis of an Al Gore, okay?
Mm-hmm.
He's basically proposing that human activity has created increased carbon dioxide, and it's a linear increase. It's a one-time thing based on industry, okay, the Industrial Revolution. And it's just going to keep increasing linearly, okay?
Now, don't some of them say that it's kind of an increasing rate of acceleration, too? I've seen some of them where it's almost straight up at the end.
Well, that's true. That's also inaccurate. But the main idea is it's linear.
Okay.
And the other is looking, once we let go of computer models, which can be rigged and turned upside down and backwards, and there are really no way, and have not proven to be accurate. And I'm going to use the word accurate because any theory that holds has to make predictions that turn out to be accurate.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So when Dr. Semmelweis, you may or may not have heard of him, but he's the one that figured out that when the doctors examining women with the pregnancies didn't wash their hands, there was an increase in sepsis.
Mm-hmm.
Infection from one person to another. And he simply looked at the midwives who did wash their hands, maybe just out of hygiene, because doctors, they didn't know about bacteria then, and they saw that they weren't spreading sepsis.
Well, and he was really attacked for making that observation, right?
Oh, he was massively attacked, saying you should wash your hands. So that's obvious today, but at that point, he was massively attacked and actually eventually mentally broke down from the attack. However, he did, and he was able to prove that when you wash your hands, the rate of sepsis in pregnant women about to deliver decreases. So you got your theory, you do your action, and you get your results. That's the way it works. That's how theory becomes more or less scientific law or observation. So when you make a theory, it has to, you make predictions and they have to come true. And if they don't come true, then the theory is bogus.
Mm-hmm. Right.
The key concept. And that's the way science legitimately works. Start with a theory, see what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And we can look at that in different ways, but that's what we're talking about. I mean, just recently, with the idea of some of the quantum physics and the quantum, how do I put it, projection where things are moving faster than the speed of light, where two atoms, two electrons, if you have them talk to each other, communicate faster than the speed of light. That's what's coming out now.
Mm-hmm.
That is disproved Einstein's theory of relativity, where speed of light was max.
Yeah, right, exactly.
It takes 100+ years to do that, but Einstein's theory of relativity has not been able to hold up to the recent findings. Mm-hmm. That's fine. That's the way it works. That's the appropriate way it works. It's not a political decision. It's not a, quote, consensus decision. Really around the turn of the 19th century, the consensus was they've discovered everything there is to discover in physics. Okay, well, obviously that's an absurd concept.
I don't want to interrupt your train of thought, but your volume is kind of fading a little bit. I want to make sure people hear you.
Okay. How's this? I'm just getting the mic. Is that better?
Oh, yeah, that's 10 times better.
Okay, good. Okay, so there we go. That's a scientific process. My microphone has slipped down. So we, hypothesized that if you put the microphone in a particular place, the volume may be better. So I did that, and indeed, the volume is better.
So the prediction turned out to be true.
That's the key. So that's it. That's as simple as we can be.
Okay.
So I just took that approach, The other thing, okay, so that's one. I observed, based on all the records, that there are cycles of warming and cooling.
Okay.
That's an important idea.
Right.
Okay, the concept of cycles versus linearity.
Cycles mean things repeat.
And then not only repeat, but if you look at a graph, it goes up. We call it warming. You can see temperatures going up, and then you see the temperatures going down.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a cycle of warming, cooling, warming, cooling, warming, cooling over the past thousands of years. So that's a key. The other thing is, and which is you do all the time, is you pop out of the limiting belief system of the matrix of what the media, the elite politicians of both parties, and the government-funded scientists are saying.
That can be the hardest part of the experiment, actually, a lot of times.
Yeah, but that is key. Semmelweis just observed it, and he was, wash your hands. How complicated is that? But at that point in history, that was huge. He popped out of the matrix.
Yeah.
Of their belief system. So when you look at things, and which is the way I look at things, the way you look at things, and probably most of the listeners here look at things,
right.
We're not accepting, blindly the matrix belief systems, limiting belief systems of what's happening.
Also, it doesn't matter who's
that's
right.
That's part of it too.
Yeah, it's not an ego contest.
No, because we're looking about truth. We're not looking at political motivations. We're not looking at egos. We're just simply like, what's the truth here?
Yeah, exactly.
And of course, truth in the material world isn't true, because what is true is that there's only the divine.
Yeah. You just mean like predictable based on
prior to time and space.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm talking about materialistic reality.
Right. Got it.
Okay. Climate is in the materialistic reality. So that's what I did, and it was clear the cycles of warming and cooling have existed for thousands of years before the industrial age. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
And then, as I look more closely at the more sophisticated research, I began to see that the warming and cooling cycles that clearly did exist and do exist were related primarily to the sunspot activity, which seems to increase and decrease in cycles of 206 years, as well as bigger cycles.
Mm-hmm.
And the relationship, the subtle relationship of the sun to the earth, because we're in an elliptical orbit. So there are two factors going on, okay? And then the tilt of the axis, a variety of things, but pretty much the amount of sunspots. So I began looking about sunspots, and I could clearly see, because they could track the number of sunspots, that when the number of sunspots are low, you're going to get global cooling. Now, we have evidence of these kind of things. One is called the Dalton minimum, which happened around the time when Napoleon didn't ask his local climatologist when it was best to invade Russia, so he invaded it during intense time of growing global cooling. In 1815, not when he invaded, there was no summer. That's how cold it was. And he lost two-thirds of his troops. He lost 400,000 out of 600,000 troops, and they were really defeated by the Russian cold. And so we have the Dalton minimum that happened about that time. We have a Maunder minimum that happened in the 1680s. So there are times when sunspots are higher and sometimes they're less. And in my paper, I have graphs of what the scientists have found about the number of sunspots.
Did you say the Dalton minimum was around 1850 or so?
1815.
15, I'm sorry. Okay, wanted to write that down.
Yeah, 1812, well, through 1823. Okay. So it's like 1790 to 1823. So it's about a 33-year cycle. Okay. And there was another cooling area, 1650 to 1700s, called Maunder minimum. So we have historical evidence that when there's less sunspots, there's global cooling, okay? And then it gets really simple at that point. So, cycles of global warming and cooling have been going on for thousands of years before the industrial age got started, and their graphs showing that. And it seems to be related primarily, not only, but primarily to sunspot cycles, increasing and decreasing over time as in the sun's own, I'm going to call it physiology, okay? And that's the key concept. So another thing, as I looked at it, because I study, well, what happens during global warming, what happens during global cooling? Global warming is a benefit, generally. I think it was NASA, but I'm not positive, showed that we've increased the amount of green vegetation by 5% in the cycle of global warming that we've gone through. Generally, in times of warming, civilizations prosper. They come out of the caves, culture benefits, the population benefits, and that's the key. Now, during global cooling, or mini ice age, it's just the opposite. You're going to have more drought, more hurricanes, more tornadoes, more earthquakes. The ground freezes over in large parts of the world. You're going to have less food. You're going to have drought. In a major way, you're going to have population displacements and also populations just disappearing because they can't survive in the cold and with lack of food. There's also increased epidemics and plague, disease, because people can't get enough food, and therefore, and you're cold and shivering, and your immune system is weakened. And between those two, with a weaker immune system, you're more likely to be susceptible to plagues and so forth. So all that's historically true. Okay? So those are just considerations. So global cooling is not really a good thing. That's my main concern, incidentally. is the global cooling. But to get there, kind of talk a little bit about global warming. So, okay, first, I let go of the computer projection model because it's not really good. And that's the one used by the UN scientists of the IPCC, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, and Al Gore. And then we had the historical observation model. So those are our two basics of how we go about looking at that, which actually gives global temperatures, sunspot measurements, Earth, sun, gravitational distance patterns, ocean water levels, ocean temperatures, and atmospheric temperatures over thousands of years. That's the historical model. It's not a computer projection. So I chose not to look at computer models because, as I say, they can be rigged, and they apparently have been a little bit, but it doesn't matter. My focus is, let's look, as a doctor, a physician, let's look at this clinically. What's the state of the global body, and how's that worked? Okay. So this is how I'm looking at it, and in over since 1998, which I believe is the time when the global warming cycle seemed to move into pre-global cooling and global cooling, which is really, depending on who you talk about, is 2010, and getting real active in 2019. Basically, these patterns, that's another thing I look at, is, well, do we have historical precedents? Well, yeah. So basically, where we are in 2017 are pretty much similar to the patterns of 1797, which was the time preceding the Dalton minimum of global temperatures, which existed 1798 to 1823. That's what I explained, which was indeed a mini ice age. So I'm kind of like, okay, how is it similar? And they seem to be matching pretty closely. Okay, these cyclic, the cyclic pattern of warming and cooling versus a one-time linear pattern that Gore and the IPCC have predicted. Now, am I the only one out there thinking this way? Not really. There's a variety of scientists, and that's the key. I'm saying, okay, I'm not alone. There are other people looking this way. They may be a minority, and they're not on the government payroll, okay? But Milankovitch theory, which is also known as the De Vries, Suess, or Gleissbuch cycles, describes cyclic variations of Earth orbital and rotational patterns in cycles up to 120,000 years. So, okay, so other people way more informed and have already noted that. And the Milankovitch theory actually doesn't help us with the shorter cycles of 2,000 to 10,000 years or 2,200 to 2,400 years. And it doesn't help us understand what I call climate oscillation patterns of 206 years, called the centennial cycles, okay, or bicentennial cycles, okay? And basically, these cycles are marked by normal global temperature variations of 0.5 degree to 1 degree Celsius, which is pretty much what we went through. Whether some people measure 0.4 degrees, some say 0.8, but let's just say 1 degree, and that's a pretty accurate statement that that's normal as part of the cycles, because now we have normal. So what we've gone through is a normal global warming cycle of less than 1 degree centigrade. Okay, and that helps because we have perspective. What's normal? What isn't normal? Now,
I just want to interject one thing.
Yeah.
When you say that we've gone through a normal global warming cycle, and you're talking about a short cycle, which ended, I think, from what you said, around 2010. And when did that start?
Well,
Right.
No, 1998.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. So
the key
1998.
concept is that if you think of a sine curve,
Yeah.
there's an in-between time.
Okay. So
And
when did that?
feel the cooling cycle begins 2010.
When did that warming one that ended in 1998? When did that start?
Well, it's a little not as clear because we were through a cooling cycle in the 1940s, early 1940s. So it kind of started after that. Okay, after World War II, roughly speaking, or into the 50s. But however, in the 50s and 60s, they were still worrying about global cooling, and it's really interesting about that. Okay?
Yeah.
But the key is the cycles have been going on for thousands of years before the industrial age, and they're independent of human activity. Okay, and this one was too. So the other thing is the Gore theory. Really, increased CO2 has a negligible impact on the global and warming cooling cycles. Okay, now, does everybody agree with this? No, but that's the nature of science. So we have astrophysicists, geophysicists, paleoclimatologists are beginning to more and more focus on the role of the sun in climate change. Now, every day we go through a sun cycle, right? What happens? At night it gets cold. During the day it gets light. And so this is not a new concept, okay? So sun activity and access to the planet are what we're looking at, okay? The trend of decreasing sunspot activity starts to begin in 1998 and is increasing now, okay? And we're heading towards possible another Dalton minimum, okay? Now, there are two pieces. We have the Dalton minimum and the Maunder minimum, about 1,200. So we have where these things happen. And the mini ice age, which is around 1815, where there was no summer. Okay, so that's important.
Right.
And the cooling may go down, 0.7 to 0.8 degrees centigrade, and that's, it's not comfortable, but it's within the normal curve of even the mini ice age. Now, the one thing I don't like about the cooling is it comes on suddenly. Because that means you have to prepare for it before it shows up, whereas warming seems to just increase slowly. Okay?
Okay.
So, now, some people are ahead of us. So members of the Russian Academy of Scientists, as early as 2007, said we're entering a new little ice age.
Okay.
So some people are paying a lot more attention. Okay. Now, I was influenced by the work of a top NASA researcher named John Casey in his book Dark Winter. That got me started. I just went and looked for books about what's going on, and he gave a very good overview, and he actually came up with what he calls the RC cycle, which is the relationship to sunspots, okay? But at least it's a theory, and it has predictions. And so far, these predictions have taken place, okay? Which is contrary to the man-made global warming theory.
I have to ask you one question about that.
Anthropomorphic global warming. Yeah.
Right. A question. You said you were using the historical model, which makes total sense to me because that's the real model without interpretation. But
from a doctor's point of view, it's the clinical approach.
Yeah, that makes logical sense to me. So my question is twofold. One is, can you for people that are interested in looking into it, which I hope some people will be, can we give them some ideas of what kind of sources, examples of what sources to look at? And second, since those sources are available, why is there the big disagreement?
Life just doesn't work that way. Why do people disagree about someone wise and washing hands? There's political things, there's carbon taxes, and I've tried to make my political. So I'm independent of the Republicans, Democrats, independent whatever. It doesn't matter. That's politics. Politics affects how you're going to think about these things, because when you have a certain understanding, then you do certain actions on a global level or a local level, right? So I try to, in our little talk today, I want to avoid the motivations. Meaning,
Sure.
Hey, it's to our advantage to talk about global warming because then we create a global warming tax and we can create a one world government. I want to just not even go there.
No, and I think on the level of gardening considerations is better.
Yeah, I just want to know is, are we got cooling, or or heating, and how do I design a sustainable garden?
Right. That's good.
That's really the key.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's where I want to hold it. I don't want motivation. I don't want to talk about motivation.
No, I wasn't even trying to get into that. I was just thinking, spontaneously remarking that, wow, if there's all this historical data and it's really obvious, it's remarkable that there's all this extremely heated discussion going on.
Well, that's part of global warming, isn't it?
I guess.
Heated discussion.
Okay, got it.
Well, remember, the heat of a discussion is related to the knowledge of the participants. Okay. So.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, one thing is we talked about theory. Theory has to have results. So his RC theory basically has been up to now 90% accurate, where he's predicting X, Y, and Z will happen. X, Y, and Z happens in a certain time frame. Okay. Now, every projection of the anthropomorphic global warming, I have to call it AGW because it's just too much of a mouthful.
Yeah.
AGW theory has been disproven and shown to be inaccurate. Okay? So, you got computer model generated and it just doesn't hold. Okay? In terms of actual physical reality. So we have historical, which is at least 90% accurate, and then the linear man-made AGW model, which is not giving us a accuracy. So what Casey says with our relational cycle theory is 3 points. Global warming ended in 1998. 2, the sun hibernates every 206 years, which is what we're talking about, these cycles. Hibernation means reduce in energy output and number of sunspots, which results in a long-term drop of Earth's average temperature. And basically, point 3, his theory predicts a global cooling or mini ice age, which is more serious, beginning around 2019 to 2020, peaking in maybe 2030, where people say it could be an ice age. Mini ice age, and then beginning in 2053 to start to warm up again.
Okay, I think this is a huge point. Would you go over those
33-year cycle that he's talking about?
Yeah, would you go over those years again for the prediction?
Yeah. So right now we're in pre-global cooling. Okay, we see the temperatures are decreasing in water and air a little bit. Okay. 1 degree Fahrenheit, okay, so far. Fine. Okay. But what he's predicting is in 2019 to 2020, we'll more actively go into global cooling. It will peak in 2030, and then around 2053, it will begin to move into warming again.
Okay.
Now, from a gardening point of view, but also, let's call it survival point of view, we need, this is what's important. My interest is not in global warming. I have to talk about it to get people to kind of reorient to the big picture. Okay, and so I'm going to talk a little bit about things that really, really disprove the carbon dioxide, man-made, theory. But my focus is on global cooling and our need to prepare for it, okay? Now, generally, an increasing number of scientists are really beginning to see that the sunspots are the main cause, okay? And we're beginning to make the idea of what they call solar minimum, like the Dalton, that the lower number of sunspots is going to bring you a mini ice age, like between 1793 and 1830. And again, including solar minimum included 1816 when there was no summer. That's pretty ice agey, okay? And that's where Napoleon got in trouble, okay? So there are variations. So where are times, when we look back in history, where there's a minimum and we had significant global cooling, 1650 to 1700s, called the Maunder minimum, and again in the about 1815, 1798 to 1823, the Dalton minimum. So we can actually see in my paper, I actually have a graph of these sunspots. It's not my graph, but I got out of literature.
So one clarification point is that you're talking about the coming and going of mini ice ages, not the big one that's like 15,000 years or something like that. These are the little ones that go
right,
up.
I'm talking the 206-year mini, not major.
It's not the one that covers the world with glaciers and stuff like that. Yeah. Okay.
No, we are having, and I'm going to give the data maybe a little later. Yes, glaciers are increasing, but no, we're not talking about a major ice age.
Right, got it.
A mini ice age.
I understand.
And we survive mini ice ages if we're paying attention. If we're not, we get in trouble.
Okay.
So there was real number of sunspots around 1780s, early 1780s, but it was high, and then I have another graph showing how they decrease into 1798, where we go into a cycle of global cooling. You see, that's the key. And obviously, what the global warming and cooling at that time, early 1787, had nothing to do with industry, because we didn't have any industry that was significant at that time. So again, I'm making a double point that we got warming and cooling cycles existing far before modern industry and cars and so forth. That's a really important point, because we look historically. We've got to think historically, okay?
Yeah.
So Casey, in his research, found 73 researchers in over 40 peer-reviewed papers that supported his theory and the global warming cooling cycle, okay? And therefore supported the high probability of global cooling happening soon. And this included 16 scientists who predicted this was coming, a cold area. I mentioned the Russians in 2007, okay? Then he found 18 researchers in 11 scientific papers. So what I'm looking at, what I'm talking about are scientific papers here, okay? Not people, I mean, papers represent an opinion, but there's some research associated with it.
Did he make, just out of curiosity, did he make any observation about the people that are saying vast amounts of frozen methane are thawing out now, which proves that it's getting warmer? Did he have any comment on that?
He didn't really cover that.
Okay.
That I recall.
Okay.
There's so many things going on. The world's a big place, okay? But
yeah.
Basically, he's saying 16 scientists, in other words, he's not alone, predicted the coming global cooling. 18 researchers and 11 scientific papers support the existence of the centennial cycles, the 206-year cycles, which is key. 17 researchers and 8 papers supported the bicentennial cycle theory, a little different than saying the existence stuff. And 11 researchers and 8 papers supported the cycle and the theory. And then 9 researchers and 7 papers supported temperature correlations with sunspot minimums, which is what we're talking about. And 12 researchers, 11 papers, who predicted the next solar minimum, cold age. So, the point I'm making is he's not alone. We actually have a variety of scientists, independent researchers, coming up with the same sort of findings. Okay, these are people working independently. They didn't, put it this way, they didn't read his book and say, oh, yeah, I support. No. These are independent. Many of them were done before he wrote his book.
Right. And he's predicting a minimum 13 years in the future from now, basically, right?
Well, 2 years. Oh, yes. Minimum. Yes.
Okay.
That's roughly correct.
Okay.
That's the peak of the minimum.
Yeah. Got it.
Okay. The coldest part of it. 2030.
Right.
Now, because he had lots of friends in NASA, he lost some of his popularity. He was a very popular person. He kind of figured out what was going on with the launching system when that blew up and so forth. So, but more recently, NASA, on January 25th, 2011, actually released data to confirm the idea of solar hibernation. Remember that dramatic decrease in sunspots, as he predicted. Okay, so NASA itself agrees with him, okay, as of 2011. Okay. And his organization, called the Space and Science Research Corporation, SSRC, had been working with for 4 years trying to get NASA to go along with it. And so for them to agree, that was a big deal. That they substantiated his thing. So, and a 33-year kind of global cooling time was validated by the NASA data. And in 2011, I said 2010, different people say different things, but close enough, it was when he claimed that the next phase of global cooling had begun. So it's already begun. And we do have evidence by a small drop in Earth's ocean temperatures. This is all relying on NASA and NOAA satellite measurements, basically government data, okay?
These are your historical sources, right, that you're talking about?
Yeah, the government data I consider, primary sources.
Okay.
Okay? Mm-hmm. So they're noting a drop in ocean temperatures as early as May 10th of 2010. Okay, now, in addition, other centers are doing it. Hadley Center at the University of Alabama, Huntsville, Remote Sensing Systems, all published measurements of a drop in Earth's temperatures as early as 2008. So this is going on, okay, with major institutions noting it. And they did this all separate. Okay, in other words, they were all noting things, but separate, okay? And they saw drops, UAH, the one from Alabama, noted a 0.588 centigrade drop between 2007 and 2008. The Hadley Center reported a 0.59. So, they're coming in pretty close to each other, okay? Now, the main point I'm making is we're beginning this solar hibernation, and there's data coming from a variety of sources, and apparently it's parallel to the solar hibernation that occurred between 1793 and 1830, okay, mini ice age. So that's the concern. Now, from 2001 to 2011, we clearly had a drop in temperatures, okay? And so we have a 10-year trend from 2001. Remember, 1998 is when the shift happens. Okay, now, I think it's fun to say, okay, we got the science, but, I kind of go anecdotal also, okay? So, anecdotal means, let's look around. So, in January 8th, 2010, in Bismarck, North Dakota, they had a temperature of 38 degrees below zero, with a wind chill of 50 degrees Fahrenheit, okay? That's normally the kind of temperature you're going to see at the Arctic and Antarctic poles. That's cold, okay? 2010, Miami had a record cold temperature of 37 degrees Fahrenheit, breaking an 83-year-old record from 1927, okay? And International Falls, Minnesota set a new record of cold, minus 46 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay, that broke another record. So what we're seeing is, hey, there's some evidence that something's going on. Okay, Sweden reports, and again in 2011, that it's the coldest weather in 100 years. Polish weather experts predicted that Europe and Russia will have to endure its coldest winter in 1,000 years. That beats what Napoleon went through, okay? So there are things that are happening. In 1975, New York Times ponders why world climate is changing, a major cooling considered to be inevitable. So I'm making these points because it's certainly not unanimous. We'll get into that a little bit more. Harper's 1958. So this is not new. Coming Ice Age cover story. China Daily. Sea ice causes fishermen loss. 2010. Okay, the Scientist magazine. Cooling is real. NASA sunspots disappearing. 2009. I mentioned NASA, but I'm making a point that, okay, the Russians' ice age is imminent, and that was vetted by Academy of Science, 2009. Now, we have a problem. They're saying the Arctic ice is melting, but the truth is these projections aren't accurate. Arctic ice refuses to melt as ordered. It's actually 30% greater than 2007, and I'll get into that a little bit later. I'm just trying to make a point. Okay. Anchorage, record cold, July 2008. And Arctic ice at new high, 2008. And it's actually greater now, okay? It's in billions of tons. Coldest winter decades, okay? Basically, Russia warns of cold emergence in Siberia, 2008. It was minus 55 degrees centigrade. That's 67 degrees Fahrenheit. That's cold, okay? So this is what's actually happening. And it's up to us to prepare ourselves. In 2011, NASA showed a declining water surface temperatures. Literally, the Antarctica recently, well, even from 1992 to 2001, gained ice of 112 billion tons every year. Wow. Okay. So, and actually, even the UN has accepted the Antarctica's billion tons of ice information as valid. Okay. So, what are we saying? It's not showing what's going on. And in my paper, I have charts showing that there's a decrease in snow melt, meaning more ice. Okay. And it really maxes in around 2012. That's as far as the chart actually goes, okay? So what we're looking at is, I actually have pictures of the Arctic ice cap, and from 2012 to 2013, it increases in size. It's like, what's going on? You can see the pictures. There's not even a question that that's there. Okay? Greenland, the same thing. Their temperatures are cooling at 1.29 degrees centigrade from 1958 to 2001. So we're seeing, again, theory, computer generated, and actual real temperatures. And the Greenland ice, which they talk about melting, is not the case at all. Between 1992 and 2002, it was increasing by 11 billion tons each year. So the facts on the ground don't match what the computer-generated idea is. Okay? Mm-hmm. And as I say, a theory is only as good as its predictions. And the AGW, the human cause theory, is just simply consistently inaccurate. That's the key thing, It doesn't really fit with what's happening. They were going to say the Arctic was going to be ice-free, Al Gore predicted in 2008 the polar ice caps would melt in 5 years. Well, that hasn't happened. They've increased in size. Arctic ice has increased by 26% since 2007, 409 square miles. 26% increase. And it's a fact, okay? You can measure these things. It isn't a computer-generated model. This is the key I'm obviously emphasizing. We talked about polar bears. What have you been told about polar bears? What are they out there? What's the media talking about polar bears?
They're all drowning because it's turning tropical, right? And there's no ice for them to stand.
What's really happening? Polar bear numbers have actually grown from 5,000 to 20 to 32,000. These are I would call it the bear facts. Okay. So the polar bear thing has really increased. I was talking to a client yesterday from Canada who's saying that it's not just that they're increasing, but they're having triplets. So something's going on. So
that's interesting.
From 5,000 to as high as 32,000. Yeah, it is interesting. I'm not sure what that's about. But nevertheless, something is happening, and it's called global cooling. Ice is increasing in the North and South poles, period. It's indisputable, both pictorially and, ice glacier estimates are huge. And so why am I making a big point of it? Because if we don't pay attention, we're going to get, I don't want to use the word burnt because it's the wrong word. We're going to get frozen on this issue, and we're going to be in trouble, because we will not be prepared. I'm the gardener. I'm thinking about it, It's like, I got to be prepared. I'm going to have to start building better greenhouses that are double-paned, polypropylene. Now, the edge really tipped in 2017, okay? And that's kind of what really got me going. 58 scientific papers came out with 80 graphs from peer-reviewed journals. So I use the word peer review because it's not, that had to pass at some level. And they all point out through different research findings, okay, that's the point, that the AGW, okay, anthropomorphic global warming theory, is fear-based illusion of science that's not been validated by non-politically based science. Politically based science, oh yeah, that's what we're having. This is scientists from China, Russia, U.S., Italy. I mean, it's like it's a worldwide statement that the AGW theory is just really not fitting with the hard science. There is no peer-reviewed evidence to support the AG theory. Now, there's really a lot of scientists who also disagree with it. Now, we've been told that 97% of the scientists agree with that. Have you heard that figure before?
At least that, yes.
Okay. So that is a serious piece of disinformation. What do I mean disinformation? I mean that the way it happened is that somebody's doing a thesis and they sent out, interviewed 10,000 scientists roughly 3,000 plus responded, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And then they selected down, according to interviews and so forth, down to 77 scientists. And 75 of those pre-selected scientists, who were not necessarily climate experts, felt that we were having global warming. Okay, so get the number 75, and that's how you got that 97% of all scientists. It's just not true. Now, counter to that is the Global Warming Petition Project that has signatures of 31,487 American scientists. And what do they agree on? That no evidence shows human beings are heating our planet's atmosphere at a level that significantly impacts global temperatures. That's what the petition says. That's pretty interesting. Two important scientists, Edward Teller, the father of the hydrogen bomb, Dr. Reed Bryson, who's recognized as the father of modern climatology, have signed that petition, again, that says no evidence shows human beings are heating our planet at a level that impacts global temperatures. So that's pretty significant. And they testified, and this isn't just, this is a big deal. 2007. And they rejected the AGW climate change meme. Quote, all this argument is the temperatures going up or not is absurd. Of course it's going up. Now listen to this, okay? It's gone up since the early 1800s, before the Industrial Revolution, because we're coming out of a little ice age, not because we're putting more carbon dioxide into the air. That's the key teaching. Now, there are other petitions that are out there that are significant, that are, again, a lot more than 70, people. So there's what we call the Heidelberg Appeal, done in 1992, with 4,000 signatories, including 72 Nobel Prize winners from 106 countries. And they basically are saying, no, we're not having global warming. Okay? So what I'm trying to say is the majority of scientists who are really speaking to this, if we add that up, 35,000, 36,000 scientists from America and around the world are saying, no, we're not, there's no basis for human-caused global warming, versus 75 scientists who say there is. So when we put in perspective, the majority of scientists are actually saying, no, we don't have evidence of human-based global warming. There is evidence of global warming all the way through 1998. That is not debatable. The cause, as I said, is primarily the sunspots.
Okay, so the global warming was happening, according to those guys, up until 98. And then it evened out.
Everybody agrees that global warming was happening. Everyone agrees that global warming was happening.
But these guys are saying that it plateaued at 1998. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Okay.
And it's started to move into cooling.
Okay.
Now, this 97% figure, really, 75 scientists, that's 0.0011% of the 7 million scientists that are out there. Okay? It's nothing. It's 0.00, so it's a thousandth, it's less than a thousandth of 1% of scientists who feel that global warming is happening. Now, I want to point out, which is something I read the other day, that only 27% of the U.S. population actually believes there's a scientific consensus on global warming. Mm-hmm. So people are learning not to listen to the stories. Now, if that's not bad enough, when you know it's not true, then you do other things. So basically, it's been exposed that they've been tampering with the temperatures to make it look like there is global warming. And they do this by lowering the earlier temperatures and raising the present temperatures. And the big expose came out of from the UK in the Telegraph, a guy named Christopher Booker. The data was being altered in South America since the 1950s to give the impression that we're getting warmer. And when they start comparing the raw data with the adjusted temperatures, it comes out that we're actually going into a global cooling curve, which is exactly what we know has been happening. So they took the temperatures, they actually got to the raw data, not the adjusted data, and basically, lo and behold, we're in global cooling. That's what the correct data shows. And they saw this was in Paraguay, they found it was happening in Australia, and the Arctic, Canada, Siberia. I mean, it's all over where they were adjusting it to make it show up as warming. So that's a big expose. And it's been since reviewed, and there's a paper titled, it's a long title, on the validity of NOAA, NASA, Hadley, CRU, global average surface temperature data, and the validity of the EPA's CO2 endangerment findings. The report states that after being peer-reviewed by administrators, scientists, researchers from the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, researchers from MIT, and several of America's leading universities, the data used to support the AWG climate change is complete bunk. That's an important statement from all these people. The problem is, like with the vaccine thing, and I don't want to bypass that, our faith in science gets undermined because they're not being ethical. Now, what I like about the global warming, rather than with the vaccine, where just this William Thompson came out and said, yeah, they hid the data, the Afro-American boys who got the MMR have 3.36 times more autism. Okay, that data got hidden. It comes out 8 years later. It's just one person. We're talking thousands of scientists not agreeing with this data and exposing it. That's wonderful that the science, the climatologists are acting with that level of integrity. I think it's really, really good. They've clearly been caught red-handed by ethical scientists, climatologists, of attempting to alter historical data and therefore change, just create a climate change narrative that's not connected with the reality of nature. So that's an important expose, and I think it's getting out around the world of what's going on. So we have a false consensus that doesn't exist, and only 27% of the thoughtful American public. I think it's important. They think they're fooling the people, and the people are not being fooled. That's really, really worth considering. In every level, in the general public, the public is not being fooled by anything, and climate change is just an example. Now, the European Foundation recently this year released a very insightful paper called 100 Reasons Why Climate Change is Natural and Not Man-Made. Okay, so I'm just going to list a few of the points that I think are important. This is what they're saying, European Foundation. there's no real scientific proof that current warming is caused by the rise of greenhouse gases from man's activity. They point out that man-made carbon dioxide emissions throughout history constitute less than 0.00022% of the total naturally emitted from the Earth. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about carbon dioxide. I'm going to digress because I think it's important to understand that in our atmosphere, carbon dioxide represents 0.04% of the atmospheric gases. 0.04. It's not even 1%. 0.04. Okay, and of that, 3.5% is human generated. So we're talking very, very, very low percentage. 0.00. A thousandth or a 10,000th of the atmospheric gases. So I think it's important. Another little point that I find fascinating to me is that, generally speaking, carbon dioxide does increase. Now here's the key. About 800 years after you move into a global warming cycle. So it's associated with afterwards, not before. In other words, carbon dioxide doesn't cause global warming, but it increases after global warming. That's interesting as I look at the math. After World War II, there's a huge surge in CO2 emissions. Okay, that's because of industry. But the global temperatures fell for 4 degrees, up into the 80s. Global temperatures were falling, but there's a huge CO2 increase. Now that raises a question about CO2 and temperatures.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And throughout the Earth's history, temperatures have been warmer than now. And I'll particularly note the 14th century, the 12th century and 14th century, we did have global warming peaks that are higher than normal. So that was pre-industrial as well, and I have graphs about that. Okay, but basically temperatures, so CO2 is shooting up, temperatures are falling for 4 decades after 1940. Mm-hmm. So what we see is temperatures have been warmer than now, and CO2 levels have been a lot higher as well. Now, there is basically natural climate trends in the 0.7 degree or 0.8 degree centigrade increase in the global temperature in the last 100 years is consistent with basically a long-term trend. Okay. Mm-hmm. Now, I think we're also talking about sea levels, and
yes,
they're not rising. Well, I didn't say it right. They have been rising steadily since the last huge ice age 10,000 years ago. So they have been rising. Okay. However, they've been monitored by in Manhattan since 1850. Okay, and what they found is there is a slight rise, and I'm going to tell you what it is. It's the height of a nickel and a dime put together. It's like 0.147 of an inch. Okay, per year. It's really almost zero here, and that has been happening. And the key is there's been no acceleration of the rising since 1850. It's a steady, minimal rise. So it would, again, Al Gore talks about we're going to be 20 feet, oceans are going 20 feet higher. I think it was by 2015. That's not been proven, okay? Mm-hmm. The other thing they point out, this is Philip Scott, Professor Emeritus of Biogeography in London, says that climate change is too complicated to be caused by just one factor, okay? Whether CO2 or any other single case. And there are many factors involved. The big factor is, they say, sunspots. but there's lots of other factors, okay, and saying one thing is causing it is as he put it, as other people put it, is absurd, okay? So I kind of, I was just trying to make a point that it is a multifactorial thing, the biggest thing being sunspots, but there's a lot of other things happening. So just kind of an overview of causality in terms of that. Okay. So these are some of the things that make us kind of be more than a little suspect of the idea of what causes it. And that the change that has happened since the 80s has been well within the normal expected kind of cycle of change. So, but the idea is we have cycles, we have changes, and there's nothing new here that really going on. And that's why, a thing that I think is really worth really getting in the big picture of things.
Well, and you said that you said that the global cooling part of the cycle is the one that is. I got some static coming through from you, Dr. Cousens. You might be breathing right on your mic or something.
How's that?
That's fine. Yeah. You were still saying the. You're still getting. I think you may have the mic
breathing on it. Okay.
Where you're breathing on it. Yeah, we got like that.
Okay, how's that?
Okay, I think that's better. Yeah, you were saying that the cooling part of the cycle is the one that is not so good for humanity. And if this RC theory is correct with the 2030 peak, what are the practical consequences of that worldwide?
Okay, so the way I look at it, we got to talk about it historically, okay? Because we don't know about these things from our personal experience, okay?
Right.
So when we go historically and look at it, there's one other thought. Okay, it was 2015 that he said that Manhattan would be underwater, okay? Because really, the seawater's really only going 1.7 to 1.8 millimeters. That's very small per year.
Oh, okay.
And it basically 1.1 inch every 10 years. Okay, just to get perspective. Okay, just so we kind of get. And again, the water temperatures, at least this year, have actually decreased a little bit. Now I'm going to get to your question, and it's not really a good sign, but there is a CIA report in 1974 assessing it, because that's their job. What's going on. How is that going to make a difference? And here's what they say. This is, again, a report from the Office of Research and Development of the CIA. Quote, the Western world's leading climatologists have confirmed recent reports of a detrimental global climate change. The stability of most nations is based on a dependable source of food. Okay, that's kind of our biggest issue.
Yeah,
this stability will not be possible under new climatic era. A forecast by the University of Wisconsin projects that the Earth's climate is returning to that of the Neo-Boreal area, 1600 to 1850, an area of drought, famine, and political unrest. Obviously, they're interested in political unrest. They're concerned. Climate has not been a prime consideration of intelligence analysis because, until recently, it has not caused any significant perturbations to the status of major nations. Remember, the CIA started in World War II, after World War II. So, hasn't been a consideration. It's been warming, which is good for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
This is because during the 50 of the last 60 years, Earth has had enjoyed the best agriculture climate since the 11th century. So we got a food abundance, okay, and a food surplus, okay. The University of Wisconsin was the first accredited academic center to forecast that a major global climate change was underway. Their analysis of Icelandic temperature data, which they contend has historically been a bellwether for northern hemisphere climate conditions, indicates that the world was returning to the type of climate which prevailed during the first part of the last century, which is cooling. So this is important. So as I discuss this, okay, global warming is really beneficial, more benefits than deficits. But global cooling isn't, and that was our question. Mm-hmm. Throughout the history of human life, human livability, productivity has always been better when it's been warmer. Yeah, okay? Human populations have expanded the most when the earth was warm and turned greener. And that's the key. The fish produce more, the shrimp in aquaculture produce, the vineyards produce better grapes. Everything grows more and faster when warmer, all things being equal. So warmer climate's been really good. Things grow better in warm ground than frozen ground. Okay, that's pretty good. NASA shows there's Earth is 6% greener in the last 20 years. So those are important points that I'm trying to make. Rain has increased 6.5% per degree rise in centigrade. So again, it's good. Okay, but global warming. I'm just going to say one more thing because there's a lot of mythology. Every time there's a storm, people believe in global warming. But basically, historically, global warming has not been associated with more flooding. Okay, the Journal of Hydrology in this year showed that North America and European flooding averages are in decline. The flooding rates since 2010 are the lowest ever recorded. So we're not worrying about flooding. They've been steadily declining since the 1960s. They've also shown that droughts are at a record low. Okay. Also, they've shown that 10-year measurements of tornadoes, hurricanes, and extreme storms are lower than in the 90s. Okay, so that is really worth learning about. Now, also during times of global warming, forest fires are less because there's more moisture in the air is what the reason is. Okay, now, just to kind of look at the whole picture. So fires, everything is less because there's more moisture in the air. Now, that being said, the impact of sudden dramatic climate shifts, of cooling, are associated with famines, food shortages, starvation, epidemics, and deaths. Okay? Now, I'm going to do a little history on it because we learn through history. Well, some of us do. So, archaeologists have identified in the Nile settlements, and there's an age called the Younger Dryas, whole cultures during global cooling didn't survive. And that happened about 13,000 years ago. And the skeletal remains from this period show a high proportion of people died from violent deaths, which fighting and over food and so forth. And basically what I'm saying, food, fertility, population expansion are better in warm climates and opposite during times of global cooling. Okay. That's the key point I'm making. So food security is better. Cooling, food insecurity, and hunger. In 2170 BC, okay, that's a while ago, mass exodus from the north and Mesopotamia areas linked to global cooling. Settlements were abandoned. Refugees poured into southern Mesopotamia. We can expect, based on global cooling that's happening here, there were migrations from New England. So we're looking at Canada and upper United States were negatively affected by the global cooling. People had to move because they couldn't grow crops. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Drought eventually led to the collapse of the Akkadian Empire, 2200 BC. Okay, so we're having real things happening. In South America, there's a Tiwanaku culture. They basically disappeared between 300 BC and 1100 AD. They had urban complexities. It supported about 500,000 people. This worked with improved agriculture and so forth, but with the global cooling around 1100, cities and fields were abandoned. So they're able to track with the global cooling abandonment. So the question is what to do, but there's more data. When Europe had its great famine, the 7-year famine, 1350 to 1322, weather with rains, floods, mud, cold prevailed. This is a global cooling. And that 1/10 of Europe's population perished from famine. So that's what we're looking at. In the Netherlands, England, and Scandinavia, they had pestilence. Remember I talked about less food, your immune systems. Okay? In China, in early 17th century, the global cooling led to drought and famines. And the drought in 1638 to 1641, 3-year drought, was the worst they had in 500 years. And again, led to famine, hunger, and I'm going to say epidemics. The Chinese actually kept records. So the cold weather impacted agriculture, health, economics, created social strife, immigration, and even art and literature. So that's the bad news, okay? The growing seasons decreased by 15 to 20% between the warmest and coldest times. So we're looking at, oh my goodness, this is not good. In England, the season was shortened by up to 2 months. Okay, so in France, huge famines. 1693 again, time of global cooling, and many people died, millions literally. In Switzerland again, colder climate, snow covered the ground in the spring. They had all kinds of diseases. Their crops were devastated. The livestock died. In Norway, so I'm kind of talking about what was actually reported, okay?
Okay.
Farms at higher latitudes were abandoned. Production was significantly down to 67, 70%. So grape production stopped in the 1400s. In Italy, so even the stature of the people in Greenland and Iceland decreased, meaning less nutrition, people got shorter.
So it brings to mind an interesting question in my mind, which is, we've got Eskimo cultures right now living in the frozen areas up north, and does this kind of global cooling help or hurt the carnivorous cultures?
Animals can't handle it. They're gonna, there's much more of a die-out.
So the wildlife decreases.
Let's look at cod fishing. Cod fishing during global cooling, cod fishing decreased. We're talking Scotland, which is in the north.
Yeah.
Cod moved farther south. So.
That's interesting.
1600, basically the whole fishery thing stopped.
Okay, right.
For 30 years. So, and then you got lots of social unrest. 1709, many people in France were killed, but basically social unrest because people are out of food, they're fighting for food. Crops were destroyed, the chickens were died in the cold. Basically the chickens didn't really make it. Birds, ducks, all died because of the cold. 2/3 of the grapevines were destroyed. A much higher level of storms. So life got really tough, okay? In the Dutch and German coast, they had floods in the 13th century, 4 major floods. Hundreds of thousands of people lost their lives. So we are looking at some big problems. Now, so famine is a big deal, okay? Cold weather, rains, with the cold weather, and the livestock pretty much and crops were destroyed. Class warfare, political strife, because society becomes destabilized, okay? Particularly in prosperous countries, because people were starving. You even had an outbreak of cannibalism during the Great Famine into the 1320s. You had the pestilence, okay, bubonic plague. This is really tough, okay? In China, the Manchus in the 17th century, global cooling, famines, floods. The Ming Dynasty got weakened, and the Manchurian invaders, came in and crossed the Great Wall and conquered. Other things happened that aren't so good. In 1484, the Pope Innocent, I don't know if there's such a thing as Innocent, Pope Innocent the Eighth decided that there were witches, and they started blaming the witches for the cold temperatures.
Right.
That got us a lot of witch burnings. Okay, 30-year war in Europe was between Protestants and Catholics. All happened during the Little Ice Age. So people get more upset and can't get food, and they begin fighting. So we're looking at that kind of situation. They didn't invent the bicycle because all the animals had died or had been eaten, so they didn't have horses to pull the buggies. So in 1816, they invented the bicycle.
Interesting.
So in 1860, people migrated from New England to the Midwest because that was what was going on. Now, as a doctor, I'm also looking at many ice ages in Eurasia, 1300 to 1850. There were 881 epidemics in China, 35% greater probability of an epidemic and a 40% greater probability of a major epidemic than during times of global warming. So people shouldn't be worrying about global warming, although it's not happening now. It's like, where we go next? So you have declines in harvest, 100% more famines, people decrease in height because of malnutrition, 300% more epidemics, and a drastic increase in armed conflict. So we're looking at malnutrition, weakened immunity, hunger-related unrest and mobility. These are what we're talking about. Social, economic disruption, in malnutrition, infection, mental disease, which the U.S. is really already way ahead of everybody. A lot of depression, despair because of all that's going on. So that gives you a little bit of a feeling for all these things. It's not global cooling is a problem. Okay, fertility in China got decreased 50%. monarchies got overthrown in Europe, and I think that's the important thing.
So, just hypothetically, if you could have remember the story about King Arthur, Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court by Mark Twain, where the guy got sent back, right? And he knew about eclipses and stuff, so they thought he was great, and he had a big impact.
Right.
What if you had a story like that, but instead of eclipses, he knew about constructing greenhouses? How much could he have helped if he got support?
It would have been one heck of a lot better. It would have saved a lot of lives if they actually took it seriously.
So you're teaching gardening, right? And are you going to put more emphasis
we're teaching gardening, but we're doing, I mean, because of the shift we're doing, we're not actually doing as much teaching. We ourselves have to figure out how to go about this, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And there's a few things. I'm looking at vertical gardening to increase the space, increasing carbon dioxide, but also increasing oxygen production.
Mm-hmm.
Really looking at how do you heat these things. We don't have to worry too much in Southern Mexico about heating even during the winter, but you do worry a little bit, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
How do you do this?
Well, and besides, you want greenhouses to help the people in the extreme latitudes. You need the greenhouses to work too.
Yes, exactly. But if we get the principles down, like I have a solar greenhouse that's supposed to be able to operate at 25 degrees zero.
Okay.
We know how to work that, you see. That's the point. But we're going to have to look at greenhouse construction. I'm going to have to really revisit it, but it looks like we want to use double propane polypropyl panels. We have that in some of our greenhouses, but we don't have it in all. How do you convert? Where you just have hoop houses. How do you convert them to protective greenhouses? They're questions that personally I'm just beginning to look at. Okay, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
But my approach is really two questions. One is how to physically construct these, and the second approach really is how do you warm them.
Right, and the extreme latitudes are not just difficult because of temperature; they're difficult because of hours of sun exposure too. Right,
and probably lack of fuel.
Yeah, well, I guess they have trees to burn, right? But that's
there's a limit there.
Right.
And I'm just beginning to think about it. Just getting it myself.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's why we decided to stay here in Patagonia. I believe that we need to kind of revise how we're thinking about things, and food is a big thing. That's the biggest problem. And I review the whole history of all this stuff. It's food production. When it's cold in the north climates, the ground gets frozen and you can't grow things very well.
Right.
Just a little bit. So how do we go about approaching this?
Is it accurate to say that with all the discussion we've had up to now about how this would work, if global cooling goes according to the KC model, then the one area of response that looks positive is mainly greenhouses, right?
Yes. Also housing, like there's kind of housing, where houses are a little bit more underground.
Mm-hmm.
So we have natural insulation.
Right.
You can also wrap houses in some kind of thing. Usually it's with dirt berms.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So there are all kinds of things. What's going to be available? I don't know. Is fuel going to be available? Is solar going to be enough? I mean, we got some issues here.
Right. Right.
That require all of us thinking about it. My job in this little talk is really making the point that there's a high probability based on historical evidence that we are going to go into global cooling, and it looks like when you go into that, it happens pretty quickly. It doesn't happen gradually like the warming does.
Okay, well, you said the according to this model, the peak is in about 13 years. So, is that a linear decrease?
It gets really cold really quickly.
Okay, so it's not a straight line between now and 13 years from now.
No, I think it's going to hit hard. If we look at societies where it just comes on and things stops, that's the problem. That's how it's different than a global warming cycle.
Mm-hmm.
It seems to be more gradual.
Okay, so basically we're just laying the groundwork for a theory based on historical data, which, if true, requires some preparation.
For thousands of years, yes.
Yeah, it requires some preparation.
Yeah, what kind of clothes, what kind of housing, and most important, where I see it all is about food production.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right.
Now, how bad does it get? Well, they survived it before, okay?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
1812, I don't know exactly in the U.S. I know people had to migrate from the north. I think people living in northern United States climates it's going to be not so easy. I'll put it that way.
Wasn't there a famous picture of George Washington crossing the Potomac River and there were ice cubes floating in it, or little chunks of ice or something?
Yes, there was. So, and 1776. However, that may have been just their winter, because that's 1780s. 1780s. It was still relatively warm. They didn't really hit the cooling until 1792.
Okay. Okay.
Really cooling.
All right.
So it's a question. I'm just like ringing the bell here, and I'm not as interested in the global warming discussion, because it doesn't help us. The only reason I do that discussion is so people can kind of break out of the hypnotic understanding, and then we really got to move forward here.
Well, you're also saying that if 2019 to 2020, you said according to this model, that's when active cooling would start. Most people, if this prediction is accurate and proves to be true, people would mostly be able to see it happening within about 2 to 3 years from now, right?
Yes, that's exactly right.
Which is not very long.
That's exactly right. So, and maybe some of your listeners may know things. I mean, part of bringing it out is I'm really interested in what people had to say. I'm not quite at a place of looking at how they did stuff how people do it in northern climates, what kind of greenhouse systems.
Right.
I think that's the key thing in the discussion a little bit.
Well, and you pointed out just because they do a lot of hunting and eating animals up there doesn't mean that it's going to be easier, because you said those populations of animals go down, if I understand you.
That's exactly what I said. Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay, well, I would say to wrap things up, why don't we leave it with the kind of information that you think would be most valuable for people to be getting together at this point, to share not just for themselves, but also to pool creative information that might make it easier to get through more comfortably.
I would say that the most important thing is food production. That's what I would put in there, because when you look at it, it was malnutrition that was a key player here in terms of things.
I think that's an area that countries like America are really weak in right now, because we've been sold this idea that going to a few huge factory farms that are all poisoned is a really good, efficient solution for food production. But really, for national security and personal security, you need food production being done by millions of people within the country. And that would be accentuated.
I think what we're looking at, right, because I think transportation should be impacted, and I think it won't be so easy to get fuel out of the ground, because the ground will be more frozen. I mean, we have technologies, okay? Are they going to be available? I don't know. See what I mean?
Mm-hmm. So just...
yeah. So to me, the most important thing is go local, because there may be some impact on transportation. I don't know. But, we're living in a different setting, but don't expect that, California, for example, will be necessarily a breadbasket in the same way. So I think people need to look at their local food production as a key concept.
Yeah, and that's valuable to do no matter what the weather is anyway.
Of course, because we want to get away from the international corporate systems.
Yeah.
So this would force that. I mean, if what we're talking about, there would be more tendency towards some level of local anarchy, as people fight to survive.
Yeah, so it's better to see.
It's not like Europe, it's the 15th century or something. I mean, we do have communication systems that should work. I think we're just looking at more of a migration energy. I think it's, again, in 1815, people migrated south out of New England. So I think the northern countries, northern states are going to be hit by this. I don't want to because we've survived these things before. I don't know how bad it's going to get. It's just, but the normal cooling mini ice age cycle, we've had that in the United States a few times, and people relatively did okay.
Right.
But if you're prepared, it will make things a lot better. You have warm clothing and you have housing that's protected, then you're going to have less of an issue.
Yeah. So local cooperation in food production sounds like there's no downside to that at all. The more can be worked on right now. And if you can't grow food yourself, at least getting in touch with local people that do and supporting them as the source. Right, rather than the big factory farms.
I mean, wherever you are, I think it's good to do greenhouses that are, less affected by the cold.
Yeah, exactly.
That, no matter what, I think that's really important consideration.
Yeah, I would assume that you're planning on continuing research in these things, because this is pretty essential, to everything in life, basically.
Well, I mean, I need to get this paper out, which is it's about 40, double space, it's about 40 pages. So it isn't for the person that has a brief attention span, because there are graphs, there's points, things, But my intention now, in the next few days, once I'm done with this, will really be going, looking at how do we prepare for this. How do you prepare?
Right.
How do you prepare your greenhouses? So we have, as I said, a solar greenhouse that goes to 25 degrees below zero, and it's got warming, cooling actions, and it's solar run. I don't know what kind of fuel is going to be available. I mean, I don't know enough
Mm-hmm.
to answer some questions. What's going to happen? There'll be a societal disruption for sure.
Well, you talked about when you shut down the regular activities that have been going on at the Tree of Life in Patagonia, that you may be starting to do more YouTube videos and things like that in the future. You think that might be a way that you can...
I've already started.
Okay. So what I'm getting at is that rather than, let people just stay in kind of a discouraged position, if we can put out more information about responses and what can be done and how to grow more of your own food and more about inexpensive greenhouse construction that could be even very small and still helpful, those could be good things to do.
Absolutely. I see doing that. I need to learn a little bit more before I can do that. I need to think it through. We all need to think it through. I'm hoping that people write you who have experience or ideas.
Mm-hmm.
You get it to me as well,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we need to just cooperate and consult with each other and share information and put it to practical use to help everybody as much as we can.
Right. So,
okay.
That's key. Personally, just making note this is happening, and it's not a global warming argument anymore. It's like, how do we prepare, as we get a few years, to get this together?
Well, yeah, I think that what you're saying is the argument will be pretty much not happening within 2 or 3 years, because if this model is right, it'll be obvious.
Well, I think it's significant, as I say, that there were 58 papers suggesting, that the global warming model of Al Gore isn't true.
Mm-hmm.
Just in the first 6 months of 2017. That's significant. That's a huge shift.
Well, I think part of that is reflected in the policy of instead of you watch the United Nations as kind of a mouthpiece of the global power structure, and they were 100% talking about global warming. Now they're a lot more talking about climate change, so that no matter what direction it goes in, they win their argument and they get their policies enforced.
All right, but their word climate change is really still global warming.
Does it still mean warming? Okay. At least it's subject to change if they need to. But I think the way we should leave it is that you're going to stay in touch via your YouTube and other types of social media communications. And as we get...
People can just go to drcousens.com and they can get I'm doing about 3 Facebooks a week.
Okay, neat. So this is a new website, right? The one you just mentioned.
No, it's drcousens.com. No, it's good. It's my only website at this point, and we're developing it.
I see.
It in Spanish.
Okay. So is doctor spelled out or just DR?
Yeah.
It's spelled out.
No, it's just DR.
Okay.
No punctuation. drcousens.com.
Okay, and all the latest news and stuff will be on there, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm kind of glad you're still going to hang around as a neighbor. That's going to be good. And we'll just have to get some...
Yeah, and
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, the reason I'm talking to you today is I'm, trying to free up my space to be more outward.
Yeah.
Another part of it.
Yeah. That sounds good. So, we'll just cooperate and get some information together that people can use, and we'll make it a positive experience one way or the other.
Perfect.
Okay.
So I bless everybody that, I bless you for your good work, and I bless all the listeners that we can be inspired as beings of light to let the light shine no matter what the temperature is.
Exactly. Excellent.
Oh, amen. Shalom, 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 yes. And because from a spiritual point of view, it doesn't matter. We still need to work on our inner selves.
Exactly. That's where all
the outer changes.
Yes, that's where everything
is. So I just see it as, okay, that's what's going on. Don't worry about it. Let's just do the appropriate thing.
Right.
It'll be okay.
Right. All right. Well, hang on for a minute. We'll say goodbye in the break here, and hopefully you'll be back before too long. All right, there goes Dr. Gabriel Cousens. Very unusual discussion and got into a lot of heavy-duty stuff. I wanted to reiterate for all of you, this was not to make anyone upset either about some impending climate changes or about whether or not you think it's getting warmer or colder, because I'm not interested in supporting that conflict, mainly for the reason that it just burns up energy in fighting each other, and I don't see any benefit to it at all. Dr. Cousens has a very interesting approach to the whole climate change issue. I think that his idea of using historical data is great and makes sense. Historical data just means direct reports of what really happened. Pretty much free of, free of interpretation. So I thought that was good. I did notice that he used a fairly short cyclical investigation. In other words, mostly looking at his little cycle of 206 years, whereas we know, and he mentioned that there are much longer cycles in operation as well, including the big ice ages, the last one of which happened, ended somewhere between 10 and 15,000 years ago. And that's not what he was talking about. So the interaction and the fact that these cycles are superimposed on each other, we didn't really get into that. And we didn't get into the big, really what should be elephant in the room, I think, which is the geoengineering issue and the manipulation of these things, which is a huge issue. And whether you believe it's getting warmer or getting colder overall on the Earth, I want to make it clear, and I know people have a really hard time grasping this, but the truth is it doesn't matter at all as far as the need to stop geoengineering, whether it's getting warmer or colder, because if it's getting colder, it's essential to stop geoengineering right this minute. If it's getting warmer, it's essential to stop geoengineering right this minute. And if there's no climate change, which is an unlikely scenario, then yes, yeah, you're right. It's essential to stop geoengineering this minute. So that discussion of whether it's getting warmer or colder is completely irrelevant to whether or not we have to stop geoengineering. And remember that the United Nations, who is a completely, at the top, completely malicious organization that is there to serve the global rulers and their agenda for the destruction of the biosphere, that United Nations has been pushing global warming for many years to try to get us very upset about global warming, and now they're doing the same thing about climate change. And if they're doing it, it needs to be viewed with incredible suspicion, not because it's not happening, but because of what they want to do with your fear of it. And I don't want you to have fear of anything. And some people might say, well, that's completely irresponsible. If this terrible thing is happening, we have to be afraid of it. No, you don't. Why would you have to be afraid or worried? And exactly how is that going to help you? Even, Alex Jones, who I completely admire and appreciate deeply, is saying you have to be mad as hell, and all these other people are saying that we're not going to take it anymore. No, that doesn't work. What that does is make more fighting. And if you've noticed over the last several thousand years of Earth's history, people on both sides of every issue have been getting mad as hell and killing each other. And you notice the amount of world peace we have as a result. It's not very impressive in a positive way. So I'm taking the chance of looking like a complete fool, which is fine, because a lot of people think, we have to be so upset about these things, and you can substitute your issue, whether it's global warming, EMF, nuclear power, GMOs. I've been involved in organic agriculture since 1967. I know what GMOs do, and not just GMOs, and not just pesticides, which are a threat to our survival, but chemical fertilizers, which are a disaster in themselves. I see no advantage to being upset. None. In fact, it's completely counterproductive. And if you ever get involved in martial arts, which I did for a long time, the most amazing masters of martial arts are not the ones who are mad as hell and going crazy and just want to run up and kill everybody. They're very lethal when they need to be, but they don't get into fights, and they're so calm and still that nobody around them has any remembering what they wanted to fight about. And they're very, very powerful on that level, although levels of power that we're discussing in some of these shows, particularly Saturday night, are way beyond what most martial arts masters are talking about. So we posted some very good videos from geoengineeringwatch.org on lostartsradio.com that I'd recommend looking at, about steering the storms Harvey and Irma, how they're totally manipulated. And those videos also have a lot about data that shows that it's getting warmer all over the world in a very dangerous way, which could be completely true. I don't have any personal knowledge of that. I haven't gone out and checked those temperatures. And as Dane Wigington says very accurately, you don't even know what the temperatures mean or what they would be until you stop the geoengineering. It's a very clear, obvious, excellent point by Dane, and he also explains the details of the global warming, but there are two camps. There's one that vehemently believes it's getting too warm, even though Dane says you can't tell unless you stop the geoengineering what it would be doing. And the other one that's vehemently saying it's going to be an ice age. And that's the data that we were discussing with Dr. Cousens, which is probably quite credible, because Dr. Cousens is not foolish. He's a good scientist, much more responsible than most. And he has nothing to prove. He realizes it would be ridiculous to prove that it's getting cooler if it's not, or to prove it's getting warmer if it's not. He's a good man, and he's a friend of mine now, and I think he's very sincere, and he's done some great research, which he tends to do very thoroughly. So I don't personally know whether it's getting warmer or colder. I really don't. I would love to just tell people that I agree with them just to make them happy, but I can't do that. Because as a scientist or even an observer of things in your life, you can't say things for that reason. You've got to tell the truth, what you know, and be aware of what you know and what you don't know and what the difference is. And there's a big difference. So I don't know which is which, but I can tell you that each one says all the data supports only their side. The UN has been screaming about global warming for many years, wanting you to be as upset as possible about it. So the power structure is not trying to calm down fears of global warming. That makes no sense, because the UN has already made sure those fears are as high as possible. The only thing is they want to make it about climate change now. So just in case it doesn't get warmer, they still have you, because if it's changing, then that's still an emergency. So the point of the UN and people like that is clear. Any unusual warming or cooling or change or non-change means one very clear thing: total geoengineering for the world. The only way to save it, which I think they have a movie coming out called Geostorm that is intended to prove that if we didn't have geoengineering, we'd all die immediately in the most horrible way. And that you need not less geoengineering, but total geoengineering. That is the power structure point of view. They are not trying to make it look like the weather is okay. They're trying to make it look like it's as disastrous as possible. So whatever the point of the geoengineering is, it's not to make the weather look normal. In my opinion, it's to poison the whole biosphere and murder us. Okay, and the fact that a lot of people can't emotionally deal with that right now, I understand. We talk about how to emotionally deal with stuff like this on the Saturday show if you want to know, so you don't have to be upset, which is actually a critical skill at this point to learn. But they want you to be very upset about the climate. There's no doubt at all about that logically. They're not trying to make you think it's normal, or that it's not getting radical warming, or that it's not getting radical cooling. They want you to think any change is an immediate emergency, and that we need total geoengineering to solve it. So even in the UN, there's a lot of sincere people who really don't know what the rulers are doing, and that they're suppressing clean and free energy sources. This is not about, an unsolvable problem because we're burning oil. It's not about that at all. They have clean and free energy sources that have been available in recent times for the last 100 years, and at other times before that. And what do? What's the real energy policy of the U.S. and other countries allied with the U.S.? It's to kill the inventors and the people that have reverse engineered these technologies from other sources like Stephen Greer talks about. It's to kill them or to keep them quiet. And there's no doubt that other energy sources are available. There's no need to be burning petroleum, except that the global rulers want us to do that, because it justifies wars, and it also helps pollute and kill the planet, which is their objective. And it's also undeniable that geoengineering is destabilizing the climate, creating things like polar vortices and unusual weather of all kinds. And it doesn't matter whether you think it's warmer or colder, it's destabilizing. And it's basically a chemical air raid going on against America and many other countries of the world all the time. If the air forces of these countries were free to do their jobs, they wouldn't let any of these planes fly. So it's highly coordinated, and they're trying to make the weather as destabilizing and alarming as they possibly can. We do not need to spread the alarm about horrible climate, because they're already doing that. But they're going to use it to justify geoengineering. And that's not the answer we want. So while they're busy proving that we need total geoengineering and no more freedom also, that's very damaging to the earth, and radical population reduction, the UN has been pressing that since they were founded, and other organizations have been pushing eugenics and population reduction and population extermination, which is the real goal behind them, for many decades. It's all complete fraud. You can't say we need less population because of pollution, because the pollution is coming because the clean energy sources are forbidden. Okay, I'm trying to get into some things that I know there's a great chance that you'll misunderstand me. But that's not a good enough reason for me to just be quiet about. If you have questions or you think I wasn't clear enough about it, just give me the questions, richard@lostartsradio.com, and I'll read them all, and I'll try to answer them when we're back on the air. But for now, I want you to know that your main objective here, if you're with me in wanting these things to stop, is not to spread the alarm. The alarm is being spread already every day, 24 hours a day, by the power structure itself. You can see that if you look. They're not trying to calm you down. They're trying to get you upset about everything, and especially about the people that disagree with you on anything. You're supposed to want to kill them because they're, the problem in the world, whether it's racial, in quotes. I put it in quotes because I don't believe in races at all. But whether it's racial or wars between genders or wars between ages, old people versus young people, social classes, the so-called 1%, they want you to hate them. They just want you to hate everybody, including yourself. You need to see through this. There's one being in humanity. That's why you have such unlimited potential power for good, because you're connected directly into that same source. But not if you let your mind run all over the place and waste priceless time that you've got in this lifetime hating anybody, even the bad guys. And as long as I'm saying everything and letting everybody think that I'm a complete idiot, I'll tell you another thing that many people will object to, and that is that justice is garbage. Unlimited, unconditional love, as David Icke says, is the only reality. Everything else, including justice, is illusion. When two sides are fighting and they want to kill each other, which one do you think thinks they're fighting for justice? Both of them. Okay, well, at the risk of saying too much that is not understood, the bottom line is it's all fraud. Clean energy is available. There are even natural methods to heal the earth, clean the oceans. Kevin Costner in the oil spill in the Gulf, when they were spraying Corexit all over, not only all over the water to poison it further, but all over the people on dry land. It was incredible. Kevin Costner, who seems like a really good guy to me, was coming up with a bacterial solution that would eat up the oil. They rejected it. The policy is nothing that helps the environment is allowed. This is the real policy. Okay, so the essence of this whole thing, the problem is really simple. You've got all these, critical issues that the leaders of these movements want you to be upset about. Being upset is not the solution. And it's okay if they all think I'm a complete idiot for saying this, that you can only solve things when you get upset. No, you can solve things when you get calm enough to see what they are, and you get brave enough to see what the solution is. So the problem is simple. You have malevolent people and organizations in positions of power. You tell me which single issue that does not address and explain. There aren't any. It covers them all. So the thing is, I'm sorry, but there's beating around the bush and pretending things are different than they are is not really useful because it wastes our time. The intention of these malevolent global rulers in positions of power in government and other corporations, because government is a corporation, from what I can tell from decades of looking at this stuff, is that they intend to destroy us and the biosphere, and the rest is details. Not sure how much more simple I can say it. So my interest in it is not saying, this is terrible, look at this over here, and this will kill you, which it may, but, my point is not to just harp on that. Not just spread the word of what's wrong. That's not going to ever do it. People just want to fight, and if you try to convince them all, you're going to end up very bitter because they're going to be against you. And all you're doing is trying to spread the word or spread the alarm. There's got to be a better way. So even if the public becomes aware and you somehow got everybody to agree and wake up, oh yes, the climate is being destroyed, they don't care. They intend it to be destroyed. So, I've been looking at this for a while now. And I have great respect for the people who are fighting individual issues, and the most upset of all of them is Alex Jones, and I refer all of you to Alex Jones all the time. In fact, he had a great show with Dane Wigington very recently, and you should all watch it, because he dominated a lot of the first part of the discussion, but the second part he actually let Dane talk, which was quite nice of him, considering Dane had been waiting all this time, and Dane's gotten together and gathered more information on geoengineering and the patents and all this stuff happening in the skies, this chemical air raid on the world. He's gotten more information and talked about it more than anybody else I know about. He's done a fantastic job, and everybody should look at what he's collected at geoengineeringwatch.org. It's really quite good, and a lot of good videos. And, a lot of them do say that a big deal is that the warming is out of control. And it may be, but I'm just saying there's something a lot more important than that. This is what the Saturday show is about, and we're talking about developing something powerful enough to change the character of the malevolent rulership. That's what I'm interested in. Because as long as they remain there in their current state, even if you get several of these huge issues knocked down, EMF, nuclear power, chemtrails, chemical farming, fake medicine that's designed to kill you, all these things, if you leave one of them, it can still destroy the world, which is the whole intent. That's not a mistake. So what we've been doing on the Saturday show is gradually getting up to talking about something powerful enough and all-inclusive enough to change this. But it's not fast enough. And I don't want to waste our time and look back at the end of this lifetime and see that there's something that we could have done better, but we were too wrapped up in a preconception or defending our own ego or our own movement or some nonsense like that compared to the bigger picture. That stuff's nothing. So we haven't been going fast enough, and I've been assuming, telling all of you to drop your preconceptions. I've been assuming myself that we had to go slow on this kind of stuff, gradual, because the scope of what I had in mind was so huge that we couldn't just do it quickly. But now, based on what we've been talking about here, the urgency of stopping the geoengineering and so many other things that are killing the planet, and even what's being done to the president now is not good. I mean, they're drugging the president now. That you're not supposed to know about this at all, but Alex Jones broke it, and there are many witnesses and details. And since they decided the best way to get rid of him was to make up a story that he's getting dementia and then make it come true by drugging him, this kind of thing is not good. It's in progress now, by the way. And I have an idea of how we can actually help turn it around, and you can play the main part if you want to. So you've got to decide priorities. You want to fight and tell somebody else they don't understand what's really happening, and then go after and attack the people who believe in global cooling or global warming or climate change or no climate change, and riot in the streets, and is what they eventually get down to. Most of those guys are paid to do that. Or do you want to get still like a master martial artist or better and say, all right, I'm ready to see the bigger picture and to do anything I can to help, because I am here for a little while and might as well make use of it. We're going to talk more about that on Saturday. So if you have any interest in that, meet me back here Saturday, 6 o'clock Pacific, 9 o'clock Eastern, U.S. time, or by phone, 657-383-1002. You can also join the discussion on Saturdays if you want to on that same phone number. And remember, we've got 2 sites up now, lostartsradio.com, lostartsresearchinstitute.org. There's a Facebook group that one of our listeners started for us, a forum, free forum on lostartsradio.com, a free newsletter. So you get more information about upcoming shows and other issues that I want to share with you. There's also a donate button. If you have enough money and you want to help us keep going, I would really appreciate it. But I don't want you to donate even a dime if you're struggling for survival, please. But if you've got discretionary money at all and you want to help us, we need money to keep going. But we also need money to build the school. And now I'm saying we want to accelerate that as well. That's an expensive project, but I want to see it happen. And if you want to donate but you don't want to use PayPal and give them a % of it, then there's an address on there to send stuff into the Institute. And remember that the world situation is not to make you worried or upset or mad as hell or anything like that. There's a much deeper, much more powerful level that I am encouraging you to get to. use strategic awareness of the world situation for motivation, and to know it's a high priority in your life to contribute to it, which is not separate from the work you do in yourself. I won't say much more about this right now because it's a deep issue, and it's a really important issue to focus on and take the time to go over. But we do talk about that Saturday, so if you want to be part of that, join me. You can be the main star of it if you want to, and you are, actually. There's a secret to why that's true, and we'll talk about that then too. So if you have already been coming to Saturday, do your homework with a little more focus than usual, because we're going to start accelerating. And if not, just wait and meet us Saturday if you want to. Tell people about the show who might actually be interested. It's not for people who want to fight about it. It's for people who are open-minded to learn something new. Even if they've spent 50 years with one approach, this is for those that are brave enough to add something to their understanding and contribute and share with all of us at the same time. So have a great week, and thanks for being here with us. Remember, this information is just for your strategic awareness. And emotionally, I want you to stay connected to the most beautiful, uplifting, inspiring thing that you possibly can. So while everybody else, Alex and all the people I really like, say be upset, I say don't be upset. Be calm, relax, find out where you're tense, let it go. But not zoning out, not falling asleep. I want you wide awake, because I'm going to need your help. Have a great week, and I'll see you next time. Thanks.
Listen to our new shows with guests every Sunday night at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. All new shows and archives are available at blogtalkradio.com/Lost Arts Radio. Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/Lost Arts Radio. We're on Twitter at Lost Arts Radio. Our YouTube channel is youtube.com/C/Lost Arts Radio. Again, youtube.com/C/Lost Arts Radio. And scene.life, we're at Lost Arts Radio/profile. When you do your Amazon shopping, please use Amazon's Smile program at smile.amazon.com. And when you choose Lost Arts Research Institute in Sedona, Arizona as your charity, Amazon will donate 0.5% of whatever your order total is to Lost Arts Research Institute to help fund the building of the school and keep our radio show on the air. Please visit lostartsresearchinstitute.org for more information on the school we want to build. Be sure to sign up for our free weekly newsletter on our site under the Radio Show tab, or right from the button on our Facebook page. You're also invited to join our free user forum on our website at lostartsradio.com. You can ask Richard a question there or post about any subject that you're interested in. Our forum is growing, and we'd love to have you be part of that community. We keep it troll-free, so don't worry about others, paid or otherwise, speaking negatively or engaging in some sort of debunking tactic fakery. I closely monitor the forum for abuse, and we have a very strict one-strike-and-you're-out policy, which is why we require you to register your email address along with whatever screen name or username you want to use. We also have links to all of the great independent musicians whose music we feature each week on Lost Arts Radio. And if you like Lost Arts Radio, please consider donating a few bucks to help keep us on the air. We spend many, many hours each week to bring you the best show we can with the best guests around. You can find our donate button on our website at lostartsradio.com. Contact Richard at richard@lostartsradio.com or myself, Doug Diamond, at doug@lostartsradio.com. Thanks again for listening to Lost Arts Radio, and we'll see you again next week.
Leave your fear of the unknown and leave the planet you call home. Leave all the thoughts you think you know. It's time to let them go. Let it go. Extend your hands towards the stars and dip your toes in the valley of Mars. celestial storm in my backyard, and the universe explodes. Let's see how fast our hearts can go. 'Cause you and I could be that comet in the sky if we hold our breath, take a leap and close our eyes. We could fly. I believe if we try, we could fly. Like the heroes in the sky, we could fly. The time is now, the future's here. We'll watch our dark days disappear. I see the water running clear. Plans of fate are washed away. Frozen stardust, crystal caves, sparkling towers, cityscapes. Is this a dream or are we awake, hand in hand through outer space? Time stands still for us today. 'Cause you and I could be that comet in the sky if we hold our breath, take a leap and close our eyes. We could fly. I believe if we try, we could fly. Like the heroes in the sky, we could fly. We'll be forever stuck in a den of lions if we don't learn how to leave the past behind us. 'Cause you and I could be that comet in the sky if we hold our breath, take a leap and close our eyes. We could fly. I believe if we try, we could fly. Like the heroes in the sky, we could fly.